My guest today is Sarah Turner, who I met recently in Barcelona at the Science of Consciousness conference. And Sarah is the CEO and co-founder of CERA Thrive. That's CERA Thrive, specializing in the gut-brain connection through red light therapy and biological insight. And as I just said, I just want to talk to you about this because it's completely fascinating. Start wherever you like and tell me how did you get here? How did you get into doing this work?
Thank you. Yeah, it's lovely to be here, Tracy. Thank you. Yeah, and it was great to meet you at that event too. We had a lot of fun there. Yes, my background actually is pharmaceutical science. So I started my career actually on drug device development. So
Uh-huh.
I started out in the pharmaceutical companies, mainly GlaxoSmithKline, looking at asthma drug delivery devices, so inhalers, really.
Yeah.
And it was through that I started to think more about the role of the individual in health, because a lot of the things that I was doing was like modifying devices in order to better match how the body's working. So, for example, if a device had too much static, you could work out the deposition in the lung by using an artificial lung and like grounding it, like attaching it to ground. And it's like, should we not really be attaching people to ground rather than find like a different plastic that doesn't do this static thing? So that was my initial input into, back then it was called alternative medicine. Now we have a lot of words, biohacking or regenerative medicine or longevity or whatever we're talking about. But it's basically non-toxic, non-pharmaceutical interventions that help people with, particularly with chronic long-term illnesses. I think we all know for acute illnesses, we all want to rely on medicines, and medicines have a place. But I think for anything that's chronic, acute, and almost everything that we're dealing with in the Western world, we need alternatives. And so that's really how I spent most of my career looking at alternative medicine. And then probably the last 5 or 6 years looking particularly at light therapies, because they to me are the most interesting things, because it's amazing how the body responds to light in all kinds of ways that we're really only just beginning to find out.
Yeah. And it's so interesting to me that indeed that light is able to interact in our body. I remember some years ago, this is going to be such a baby beginner thing to say, but the idea that our bodies do engage in some kind of photosynthesis operation, even in the, like, talking about getting sunlight for vitamin D, like there is some process which is creating hormones through the sunlight on your skin. The vitamin D3 that we take is done as a hormone compound, and our bodies generate that automatically in the sunlight. We don't think about it that way because it's just like going out in the sun. There is an actual process happening, and to be able to harness that in some way and use it intentionally for certain other purposes, like specifically gut brain. So talk about gut brain connection, because it's not something new, but where does your interest come into that?
Yeah. And you're right. There are all kinds of things that are happening in the body when we're interacting with sunlight. Like you say, that conversion of D2 to D3, it's something that shouldn't be underestimated. And really, I suppose my interest in gut brain is because I have a qualification in clinical neuroscience. I always have an interest in the brain. And I really think if we're going to protect one organ, we need to protect the brain. So I'm a bit obsessed with really the brain, because I think if you've got a good brain, everything else can follow. You can really deal with most things if you're keeping your brain healthy. So I became interested in how light particularly influenced the brain. And I actually managed to get myself on some studies where I saw for myself these kind of conditions that are meant to be incurable, neurodegeneration, for example, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. People are starting to use light to help people with those conditions. So I was lucky enough to do some trials and saw for myself that it worked. The whole gut brain thing is also interesting because from a systemic point of view, now the body is a system. Everything is connected to everything else, of course. And actually, our gut and our brain are intrinsically connected. We have this very real gut-brain connection, which is the vagus nerve, to a certain extent, the blood supply, hormones. There's a lot of ways our guts and brains are connected. But the research is now starting to show that a lot of brain issues start in the gut. It shouldn't surprise us because obviously our gut is where we're sensing the environment, it's where we're processing food, it's where a lot of our microbiome live in our gut. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in our gut. But I think it is becoming interesting how much research is looking at different brain disorders and when they start in the gut. Actually, the gut's got a lot of neural tissue. A lot of their neurotransmitters are made in the gut. There's a lot of reasons why you would target the gut if you're trying to treat the brain. And for naturopaths, this is not new. This is something that, of course, people have
Absolutely.
yeah. In the world of kind of photobiomodulation, most people that tend to target the organ that they're treating. If you're targeting the gut, you do the gut. If you're targeting the brain, you treat the brain. So I suppose what sets aside my device from other brain devices is that I also have a gut panel. And what is that people's guts tend to heal first. It's a lot easier to get light into the gut. There's a lot less barrier. Bone is a bit of a barrier. So, when you've got to get through the skull, it's not a total barrier. Light can get through, but it's easy to get to the gut. When people's guts start to heal, then we find that the brain starts to come back online. I mean, you stop having metabolites leak into the blood, you drop inflammation, amazing things happen to the brain. So yes, I'm on this train of trying to teach people about the gut-brain connection, how to look after your gut to heal your brain, and then how you can actually use light to do that.
There's a couple of very strong connections to the work that I do with the Bach flower essences. Do you know Bach flowers? Is that something in your world? Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Because Bach, many years before he started to develop the flowers, he was working with the gut microbiome and developed these, what we call in homeopathy, the bowel nosodes, which are a series of homeopathic medicines. Eventually, they didn't start out that way. They started out as injectables, but they are made from cultured stool samples, essentially. So he was like the kind of the grandfather of the fecal transplant, which is the common thing that is done now, or it's the mainstream medicine. And the other thing about Bach flowers, of course, is that they are made through a very direct process of sunlight on the flowers in water. There's no question that some kind of UV light energy is implicated in how these medicines are created. So it's like taking some quality of light into your body through a completely different mechanism. So I find it hugely interesting. And I just wanted to say, I'm not going to hog the microphone, but I just watched a really interesting YouTube video that, how you fall down a hole of YouTube watching things. And it's a woman in Australia who was cured of a really extreme manic depressive illness of 20 years duration with a fecal transplant.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which was like a total Hail Mary thing. Like she had tried absolutely everything. And it's a long story, but in fact, like the movie now is like 8 years later and it never came back. And the origin of her problem was after many doses of antibiotic in a row as a teenager. And of course, back then, nobody made the connection that this sort of intense mental illness arose in her after wiping out her gut microbiome. And this was just so encouraging. And it so speaks to what you're talking about. Yes, it can be that you work on the gut to fix something that's going on in your brain.
Yeah, the microbiome is just incredibly important. And in fact, when you think about it, we're more bacterial cells than human cells.
Way more, 10 times more.
I can never get a grip on the number. It depends where you look, but certainly more. And so that kind of gives us an indication of how important it is to look after your microbiome. And I think, again, there's been some fabulous, like talking about YouTube and movies and things. I don't know if you watched that fantastic fungi. This film that kind of started to talk about fungi, and that was like in nature and in trees, but it's the same in us. We are probably communicating with our bacteria. They're communicating with us. They're communicating within themselves. So if you do have a bad environment for the microbiome, like with antibiotics, or we're all eating pesticides and other kinds of pollutants, definitely is going to impact your health, and to what extent really depends on how badly you damage the bacteria. So that's a fabulous story. How wonderful for that person that they could find that natural remedy. It's unnatural, you're having a transplant, but at least it's non-toxic. It's something that your body can recognize. So
Yeah, yeah. And so, of course, she went on to really try to become a champion and an ambassador for this kind of therapy, which otherwise it was something that her husband read about online or something, and it was not at all well known. Like, she had to go to her psychiatrist and to the hospital where she'd been treated so many times and really push for them to investigate. And I'll just throw in another thing, having been a homeopath for almost 30 years. We have homeopathic remedies made from many, like beyond the Bach nosodes, E. coli, for instance, or that kind of like common gut bacteria. And those things have a personality profile. It's not just a, this will fix this or that sort of physical manifestation. They all have their own personality profile. And yes, we are being influenced on the level like that we could never imagine of the way your thinking process works by the bacteria that live in your gut that we require in order to live, but that many times get out of balance because one team gets overrepresented there, and that is something that can change everything about who you think you are.
yeah, I think so. There's some fabulous kind of stories from nature. There's a particular bug, I think it's called Toxoplasma gondii. I need to look it up. It's something like that, but it affects mice. And if mice become affected with this particular bug, they start to seek out cats. They start to run in front of them and run around them, because the life cycle of this particular bacteria is that it wants to be eaten by the cat. That's the next stage of its cycle.
Oh, wow.
So it totally takes over the character, totally takes over the mouse, really, and causes these totally erroneous behavior patterns for its own gain. And it makes us wonder, we're all dealing with all different things, candida, and like you
I
said,
was just about to say candida that makes you like crave sugar and more. And you're like, what's wrong with me? I don't want to be eating these things, but you cannot stop yourself.
Yeah. There's all kinds of crazy things. There's a hairworm or something that infects grasshoppers and makes them jump in the water and drown because that they need water as their next stage. So I think it's a very real thing. And that's why it's so crucial to look after your bacteria. And I think going back to the light therapy, we know from animal studies that you can very directly change the species profile of bacteria when you shine light onto the abdomen of an animal. In humans, maybe we're not getting right onto the bacteria, but you're certainly getting to the gut. If you make the gut healthier, then you make the environment for those good bacteria to live. So I think people really need to understand, okay, this isn't something that's just one off with the person with transplant. Everybody needs to have the best environment they can for these bacteria, because they could be calling the shots. You're
Yeah.
for a community, you're making these decisions between different species. We're not just a human living this life. We're more like a collective.
Yeah.
So you want to
Wow.
got the good guys with you so that you can make the good choices.
So cool. Now, I was just about to ask to talk to me more about this technology, because from what I gather, this is not a kind of, I don't know, in my world, we would talk about something like a Rife machine, which is going to have a specific frequency, which will be harmful in some way to the bacteria that you want to get rid of. Is this similar or like totally different plane?
It's different. It's still frequency medicine because you have two different kinds of frequencies. You have the wavelength of the light. So that's a distance of the wave. And then you can also add a frequency in that you can pulse the light by turning the light source off and on.
Okay.
But what we're doing is there are different wavelengths of light. And when I talk about the wavelength, that equates to the color.
Okay.
Longer wavelength is, if you remember, like the rainbow down the red end, and then shorter is down the blue end. So if we go right down into the blue and even into the kind of ultraviolet light, that light is so short wave that it has an energy that it can actually knock an electron out of an atom and can be harmful. So that's why UV light potentially is harmful. And that's why if we want to kill bacteria, we would use that UV light. But what we're talking about with these therapeutic devices is in the red range, which is long wave, which is a gentle light. It's not harmful really to any kind of life, but it is healing. So what we're doing with it will penetrate deep into the body. The longer the wave, generally, the deeper it will penetrate. It changes a little bit as it gets really long wave red because water starts to absorb. But just for this simplicity, the longer wavelength goes deeper. So that means it goes right into the body and it starts to activate healing. Because really, this is the kind of light that the body is used to seeing at sunrise and sunset. So triggering that, okay, it's sunrise. We need to switch on all these processes to make sure the body's ready for the day. And then at sunset, okay, let's switch on all of these processes, flush the brain, regenerate the muscles, do everything that we need to heal overnight. So really all we're doing with red light therapy is harnessing that natural switch that the body has anyway at sunrise and sunset. We do get red light in the middle of the day too, but it's also with the UV that you've been talking about. So sunrise and sunset is when we get the red on its own.
Very cool. And how do people use this?
It's actually such a simple tech. All we need to do is we have LEDs. Before the advent of LEDs, which I suppose was like the 1980s, we used laser. And laser light was a little bit difficult to handle because as laser beams can be a bit destructive, you have to be careful not shine it in the eyes and not too strong. But now we have LED light, which is non-coherent, but it's very good with these healing frequencies. Actually, I've got a little panel here. I can just show you this. So this is a body panel and you can see the tone. Simple. So this is the red, and then in between is the near infrared. It's not visible to the human eye. The computer up a little bit, but actually all of these LEDs are just as bright. And I also have a headband, so you can put it in any form. But that is just delivering light. And as long as you have it like flush to the body, up against the skin, you know you're getting the full dose of light. And so these red light technologies are so easy to use. You can just put them flush against the body. The body recognizes the light straight away. The body's covered in light receptors. So really you only need to do 10 or 20 minutes a day and you've had the equivalent of what the body is expecting to get if you were outside at sunrise and sunset.
Oh, fantastic. What was I going to say? Oh, you just mentioned near infrared, and I wonder about, I know it's a popular thing now to have a near infrared sauna, let's say. So what would be I don't know, does it compare in any way to what someone might experience with a near infrared sauna?
Yeah, so usually saunas, unless they've got these lights on them, if they're just a near infrared sauna that's generating heat.
Oh, it's just heat.
It is a slightly different mechanism because the body experiences near infrared as heat, but that's a longer wavelength.
Okay.
These devices go up to about 1200 nanometers. The saunas are generating near infrared, which is about 3000 nanometers.
Okay.
So in place of the wavelength, because as you get longer and longer wave, water starts to absorb, molecules start to move, and then the body starts to experience heat. Heat is also very useful and the body loves heat, but it's a different receptor.
Okay. So this is not, you don't feel warm when you use this?
A little bit, but not overly, no. They used to call it cold laser therapy. Now they just call it photobiomodulation because we're trying to make it more descriptive. But actually, with the body pad, it's just a little bit of warmth. It's not like a sauna.
And they're generally done like together at the same time?
I do it because I want people to make that connection also in their minds. It's not necessary, I don't think, but there is an increased and synergistic effect of healing both organs at the same time. So my protocol is always to do both at the same time. And also everyone's busy. If you do your little therapy session, it's 10 minutes, put both on at the same time. I have sound files. I have all kinds of beats that you can play, hypnosis, meditation, whatever you want to do. I'm so busy at the moment. I usually put it on while I'm working because I also want to pair the function with what I'm trying to do. So if I'm trying to focus, I put it on and I focus while I'm using it. But most people, I think, sit and take 10 minutes out and maybe meditate or listen to some sounds that also get your brain in the same frequency. Because as I said, you can pulse these lights in any frequency you like. So, for example, a gamma frequency, when the body's attending to things, it's in a gamma, a 40 hertz pulse mode. You can pulse the light to entrain the brain into that. So,
Well,
the combination of photobiomodulation with the light and neuromodulation with the pulsing.
that's phenomenal. Have you gone through like many iterations of this, or this is pretty close to the original design that you started with?
This is my first design.
Wow.
This is my first design because this is and is a process, and I want to use this device, get a lot of feedback. I'm currently doing a lot of research. There's obviously always improvements, but right now, because we started out with already 6 programs, there's quite a lot there already to do the research. So I'm not really updating anytime soon because we are having such a good effect with this particular system. So I'm quite happy. Let's really get the data in, because I think one of the things in the industry is there's not a lot of funding to get data. So it's down to individual companies, or there are some people doing research, but it's obviously far less funded than the pharmaceutical industry. So the more data we can get, the better.
Do you get, you just mentioned the pharmaceutical industry again. I'm just curious, do you get pushback from anywhere about this? Is there a lot of pushback against red light therapy in general, or it's under the radar of anybody who would want to malign it?
It's not necessarily that there's pushback. It's just it's very difficult to get it approved as a medical device. Firstly, because within the FDA, you have to have somebody who's willing to take on these devices, and that's hard in itself. And then they have a lot of criteria that you have to meet. And so historically, and even now, it's difficult to get approved. And so red light therapy is approved by the FDA, but only for specific things like pain relief, increased microcirculation, and wound healing. So things like the gut and the brain, it's a wellness device with the FDA, because you're going from a baseline of where you're at to better. You're not curing, treating, diagnosing anything. But it would be nice if the industry as a whole could actually start to get medical claims for these things, because then people could get prescribed by their doctors. And at the moment, they can't.
Ah, I understand.
Yeah. So it is a shame. I think it's not only that there isn't enough data, it's more than that. It's just there's not anybody within those regulatory bodies who are prepared to accept the data, even if they had it. So it's an uphill battle. But there are people who are trying to do it. There are different light companies that are looking. I know someone who's going for long COVID, someone mild cognitive decline, autistic spectrum disorder. So hopefully, once one of the companies gets that approval, then it will open the gates more for more and more applications.
Nice that there are other, in a sense, it's nice that there are other companies who are working on those things, because it increases public awareness in addition to having more people on the regulatory bandwagon to try and move the needle there.
Yeah, I am totally I'm not into competition. I'm definitely into collaboration. And every time someone kind of gets some kind of approval, I think we're all cheering them on. Recently, there was medical approval for macular degeneration with near infrared. That was a big deal. So the FDA have approved a very specific device, I will add. You don't want to just use any device, but a very specific device has been approved. And then here in the UK, there has been approval for side effects of cancer drug issues, which I know is very niche, but getting it just into the national health system we have here is all of these little steps I feel like are stepping stones to getting these big approvals. And then people will be able to access this through their doctor. At the moment, in the States, you can access through your doctor, but in other countries, it has to be like wellness or consumer electronic.
So tell me, what's the, what, if anything, like what's the bottleneck for you here? What would you love to burst through that would sort of change things?
I think the main bottleneck is just education. It's just getting the word out that there is an alternative to some of these conditions and things that people can try. So I spend a lot of time doing podcasts like this or doing education. I've got a webinar straight after this. I also have people that have had a success story share their stories. I have actually, he's now one of my team members, but a guy with motor neuron disease, or you might call it ALS, that's had some great success using this particular device. So he's been sharing it, and then he's able to coach other people. So I think the bottleneck is really getting people to understand, yes, light can get through your skull, because most people, but that's like, I've had even doctors push back on that, even though there are studies and you can clearly get a skull and show it shining through, there's still that resistance.
But this is a thing, like an X-ray stops at the bones, like light doesn't go through. That's the whole point, is that bone is one of the things that is most believed to be impervious to light. That's a big deal.
It's a big deal getting people to understand, but actually near infrared light will go straight through. We're very transparent to these forms of light. And in fact, the brain is probably doing a lot of things with light. And it's also generating light. We're emitting light. We receive light and we emit light. There's so much research coming on biophotons, although it's not new research, but it's gathering pace. So yes, it is a bit of a stretch for some people, that people think it's all dark in their skull and that nothing's getting in. But actually, we're very transparent to these particular healing wavelengths. So I think once people start to understand that, and they start to understand, oh yeah, the body is doing things at different times of day, or we are responding to light. Like you say, I think most people now understand the whole conversion of D2 to D3 in the skin. So that's a light phenomenon. Yeah. We know that. Even jaundice with babies, what do we do if we have jaundice babies? We put them in a light chamber, because we know that allows the body to make that conversion of the bilirubin. So I think getting people to understand that light is having this effect on biology, and that something, because also it seems a bit far-fetched, something as simple as just putting a light band on can help you with your neurodegenerative symptoms. But once people start to try it for themselves and see the effects, then of course it's different. So it's just getting past that barrier of getting people to understand light has an effect on biology and can get through the skull, and then getting people to try it. Because once you've tried it, the convincer is there.
I'm so keen to try this. I can't even tell you. Tell people where to find you or where to find your company. Of course, I'll put it all in the show notes, but.
Thank you. Yes. Like you say, it's CERA Thrive. It's spelled CERA, like the brain version of Sarah. Even though my name's Sarah, but it's CERA Thrive, CERA Thrive.com. And then all my socials are just CERA Thrive. So I'm on all of the different social platforms. And my email is just Sarah with an H at cerathrive.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for doing this. This is very cool. And I'm absolutely intrigued. I have to try this for myself.
I think you would love it, because, the whole thing about wavelength and frequency, you're already there. You already understand the whole importance of it. And we didn't even get into, maybe I'll have you on my podcast and we'll talk a bit about how light imprints onto water. Because I also think that's one of the pieces in how some of these, like we could talk about Bach's flower, how that is also having an effect. I think light is crucial for that imprinting onto water, and how different biological substrates are doing that. So it's a very interesting field all around.
Oh, absolutely. I wish we had time to talk about that now, but we'll talk again for sure.
We'll do it another time. Yes.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure, Tracy. Thank you.